Before we get into the third chapter of Gender Talk, I want to take a moment to do a writing exercise that revolves around a poem. I think you should definitely use this poem with your students, but the writing exercise is something you can do with almost anything, especially short things that you read aloud in class that seem really thematically dense, the way this poem which is by Audré Lorde, does. So I'm going to take you through it in real time. This is exactly how I would do it with a classroom, okay? Even to the point where when I reveal the writing prompts, this is exactly how I would do it with my students. I'm going to write with you. So let's kind of imagine that I am in front of a group of students or in front of you. This is exactly what I would say. I'd say, okay, we're going to read a poem. We're going to read it twice. And I'm going to give you 3 writing prompts. Sharing is optional afterwards, but I hope that you will share. So everyone get a pen and a piece of paper and a notebook. I'm going to do the writing exercise with you. All right, so this is a poem by Audré Lorde. I'm going to read it through twice. If I were, just kind of side note, if I were with a group of students, I would read it through the first time to kind of put the cadences into the air, and then ask for another volunteer to read it. Okay, so this is a poem called Who Said It Was Simple by Audré Lorde. There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in netics, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hire to make them free. An almost white counterman passes a waiting brother to serve them first, and the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by my mirror, as well as my bed, see cause in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering, which me will survive all these liberations? Who Said It Was Simple by Audré Lorde. There are so many roots to the tree of anger that sometimes the branches shatter before they bear. Sitting in netics, the women rally before they march, discussing the problematic girls they hire to make them free. An almost white counterman passes a waiting brother to serve them first, and the ladies neither notice nor reject the slighter pleasures of their slavery. But I, who am bound by my mirror as well as my bed, see cause in color as well as sex, and sit here wondering which me will survive all these liberations. Okay. I'm going to offer you 3 writing prompts, give you 2 minutes to complete each one. You don't have to bother watching the clock. I'll just let you know when you should move on. So, the first one is, I'd like you to make a list. It can be bullet points, however you like. This poem, 1 word, 2 words. This poem is about. Okay, this poem is about, and then just start listing. You have 2 minutes. Try not to judge yourself too much. Just keep writing. Keep that pen moving. That was 2 minutes. The next writing prompt I'm going to give you is another 2 minutes. I'd like you once again to finish this sentence. This poem is really about. This poem is really about, and just finish that sentence. I encourage you to just make a list. Give you about 2 minutes. Feel free to look back at the poem. I'm in the middle of filming. Okay. All right, next writing prompt. Again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes for this. Finish this sentence with 2 things this time. This poem is really about the relationship between blank and blank, X and Y, and just make a list of those 2 things. This poem is really about the relationship between something and something else. Okay, we'll give you 2 minutes for this one too. Okay. All right. So wrap up. Write down one more if you got it. If not, that's okay too. Okay, we're gonna share. I said that it was optional to share, and that still holds. You don't have to share. If I were with my students, I would ask them to maybe pick out at least one from each of their lists that they would like to share, and then go around, depending on how often you share writing with your students and how kind of used to the practice they are, but also feel how I feel a lot more calm and focused after doing that. And I think that's something that really translates into the classroom. And you can see this is, it's a longer video. It's going to take you about 10 minutes, maybe 15 to do this. And so you'd ask people to share, but share without commentary, and go through the first lists, then invite them to share from their second list, then invite them to share from their third list, always repeating again, this poem is about. I'm going to share with you just the list that I have made here in my writing, and actually I'll share about 5 from each one because the first one's really long. and I'll share. And I think you'll find that there's a kind of incantatory quality in just sharing this poem is about over and over again, and it lets a lot of things into the classroom and a lot of things intermingle in the air with your students, and it can be very powerful. This poem is about anger. This poem is about hate and love. This poem is about waiters. This poem is about what you overhear at the next table. This poem is about rolling your eyes. This poem is about breaking your heart. This poem is about feeling left out. This poem is about feeling invisible feelings. Okay, now we're going to share from our second list. Repetitions are fine, they're great. They tell us things. They tell us that maybe there was something especially important or especially pertinent in that reaction. This poem is really about how it feels when straight white women talk about social justice. This poem is really about anger that comes up from everywhere. This poem is really about mirrors. This poem is really about anger that shatters you before you can make a difference. Okay, now we're going to read from our last list. And I would ask at least everyone to share at least one thing from that final list. This poem is really about the relationship between race and gender. This poem is really about the relationship between Audré Lorde and her white peers. This poem is really about the relationship between frustration and limitations. This poem is really about the relationship between arguments and subtleties. Okay, so that's a writing exercise that I've done with an Audré Lorde poem called Who Said It Was Simple, but it's one that can really serve you well, and you can kind of take out whenever you need to focus energies. You can just throw the poem up on the board, read it through twice. That encourages people, the students in front of you, to consider the language more deeply. And then this exercise with the 3 prompts that you reveal one at a time, and then give 2 minutes. Again, this poem is about, this poem is really about, and this poem is really about the relationship between something and something else. So thank you for doing that with me. Appreciate it. Now we can get into Gender Talk Chapter 3.